You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by.
3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm Christine Nicholas, Chair of New York State Tourism Advisory Council, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is now 11:03 a.m. We'll start by taking attendance of those video conferencing in, and I'll call the names. In fact, Ross, I'm going to ask if you, since you have the notes in front of you, if you could help with the attendance since
Sure.
I'm zooming in. That would be helpful. So
Sure.
go ahead, Ross.
Yes. So I think I see Val. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, Valerie Knobloch.
I see Eleanor.
Eleanor Tatum here.
Dave. I'm sorry, Dan.
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Kelly.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
And George.
George and Tim.
George, you still there? We heard George earlier. I'm not hearing him now.
You might just be muted, George, but
Okay. We'll wait for George to check back in. Is there any other TAC members on Zoom who I didn't call? Nope, that's it.
then do we want to go?
And then
Okay.
we'll go
Is
around
it-
the...
Yes, if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I'm Ross Levi. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Division of Tourism and a Vice President here at ESD.
Rich Gagliano, SVP Marketing, ESD.
Ed Carr, External Affairs, Discover Long Island.
Marky Wilson, I Love New York.
Heather McKellany, New York State Division of Tourism, I Love New York.
Sarah Poe, Vice President of Marketing at the Strong National Museum of Play.
Steve Dupnick, President and CEO at The Strong.
David Filipiak at Photographiska New York, here in New York City.
Alexandra Stanton, CEO of Empire Global Ventures and co-chair of the Parish Museum.
Ralph Tregali, Delta Airlines.
And Sarah Emmert with I Love New York. That's everybody, Christine.
Okay, terrific. Thanks so much. And just as a reminder, for those of you that will not be speaking, if you could just mute your microphones. And you can remind me to do the same if I forget, so when I'm not speaking. So all members have been emailed a copy of the minutes, and they're also available on the ESD website. Can I ask if there are any changes to the minutes suggested? Not hearing.
I'll move their approval. Valerie.
Okay, very good. All right, and I need a second, please.
So moved.
Okay, Alexandra, thank you very much. I'm going to ask if there are any opposed. No, I'm hearing no opposition. The motion carries and the minutes are approved.
Barbara Lee, Dean Spielvogel here.
Hi, Barbara Lee. Great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
So I will start with the state budget. So at the beginning of May, the legislature passed $229 billion New York State budget, which includes funding that continues to prioritize tourism investment and help support the industry as it continues to recover from losses as a result of the pandemic. Later in the meeting, Ross will provide an update on the I Love New York and Division of Tourism budget that were included in the budget. And for my report, I'll be covering some of the other tourism-related budget items. The fiscal year 2024 budget extends the New York City musical and theatrical production credit to continue support for New York's performing arts sector. The budget now includes a provision making off-Broadway productions eligible for the credit, extends the application deadline to June of 2025, and raises the overall program cap to $300 million. As visitors continue to set record-breaking attendance numbers at state parks across New York, the budget has prioritized. I'm just going to ask whoever could go on mute. I don't know, Barbara Lee, you joined us late. That may be your phone. I don't know if
What's
anybody
wrong
else
with it?
hears that. If you could just go on mute, that would be great. There's a little background noise.
Not here. I
No?
don't think.
Okay.
No.
All right. But everybody who isn't speaking should just be on mute, just as a reminder. Thank you. Okay. So as I was saying about, we set record-breaking attendance at state parks across New York. The budget has prioritized park maintenance and improvements by providing $200 million in capital funding for the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. I know you'd like that one, Barbara. Formerly. The budget also provides the MTA, the nation's largest transit system, a stable long-term financial plan, including $35 million to improve subway service on weekday, middays, weekends, and weeknights, which will aid in the transport of visitors and commuters alike across the city. $455 million is included for a complete overhaul of the iconic Belmont Park horse racing track on Long Island to make it a year-round attraction. $30 million in funding has been set aside to support New York Zoo's botanical gardens and aquariums. $92.5 million has been earmarked for new capital projects at the Olympic Regional Development Authority's winter sports facilities in Lake Placid, Wilmington, North Creek, and the Catskills. The budget also provides $7.5 million to support the new LGBTQ+ museum slated to open in 2024 in Manhattan's Upper West Side. And finally, the budget includes $2 million to help county fairs with marketing and promotion efforts, delivering on Governor Hochul's commitment to enhance coordination between the fairs and the Great New York State Fair. So since our last meeting, there were a couple of other announcements outside the budget that are also important for tourism. Council on the Arts Awards. In April, the governor announced more than $42 million in awards through the New York State Council on the Arts to 144 small and medium-sized capital projects. 57% of those grants were provided to organizations with annual budgets of $1 million or less. The awards prioritize projects focused on accessibility, artistry, cultural development, sustainability, and structural and historical improvements. These awards and projects will continue to support the health and vitality of the state's cultural organizations as they continue to play a pivotal role in the state's tourism industry. The governor also announced that Utica was selected as the host city for the 2024 International Ice Hockey Federation World Women's Championship, tentatively scheduled for next April. USA Hockey will host the event in conjunction with the Upper Mohawk Valley Memorial Auditorium Authority and the Adirondack Bank Center and the Utica University Nexus Center. The IIHF World Women's Championship is the premier women's international ice hockey tournament. Utica will welcome 10 international teams, 350 players, 30,000 local spectators, and 20,000 overnight spectators to the Mohawk Valley. Earlier this month, Governor Hochul announced the seasonal opening of the 524-mile New York State Canal System, kicking off 199th consecutive season of the historic waterway. Locks and lift bridges on the canal will operate daily through October 11th, providing endless opportunities for boating, fishing, and sightseeing, tourists, canal enthusiasts, and all New Yorkers. Additionally, the On the Canals excursions program returns with new and expanded opportunities to experience the outdoors along the canal corridor and the Empire State Trail. Last year, the program attracted more than 13,000 participants. Excursions this year includes expanded accessibility offerings, allowing individuals of all abilities the opportunity to recreate safely, plus boating, kayaking, and walking tours, as well as cycling, hiking, and yoga along the trail. And finally, because of its connection with the I Love New York slogan that we all know and love, I did want to mention the governor's joint announcement with Mayor Eric Adams and the Partnership for New York City in March. In an effort to showcase the city's strengths and help inspire New York City post-pandemic resurgence, the Partnership for New York City launched a targeted civic campaign called We Love, We Heart NYC. We Love NYC campaign is not focused on tourism, but rather is a call to action for New Yorkers across the city to help aid in revitalization efforts. This is focused through themes such as prioritization, public safety, supporting small businesses, caring for parks, and litter cleanups. The campaign is leveraged with over 60 businesses across the city in an effort to remind everyone why New York is one of the greatest cities in the world. And that concludes my report, and I'm open to any questions. Anybody? Okay, in that case, then I am going to turn this over to Ross for an update on the I Love New York programming. And welcome back, Ross. I know you've been traveling quite a bit on behalf of the state, so we thank you for all of your service, and I'm just amazed at how much you guys do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine. Yeah, actually, in the middle of the tour, I guess is the way you'd put it. Yeah, it's been plenty busy, as I keep reminding the team. May and June is really our busiest period of the year, so it's a little bit of holding on till July 4th, but a lot of great things which I'm happy to report on. Actually, before I do that, we've been joined by a couple of people in the room who didn't get a chance to introduce themselves. Maybe we'll do that first.
Randall Borscheit, I'm doing cultural guide to the Hudson Valley.
Bonnie Weiss, traveling with you.
And I don't think we had anyone join us via phone, but just wanted to check in.
Natasha Caputo's on. Thank you.
Hi, Natasha.
And it looks like somebody from Senator Serrano's office.
Okay.
Okay, well, welcome.
Great.
Catherine Nichols, too, as well.
Great. Hi, Catherine. Great. So before we get into our program work, as Christine mentioned, the legislature passed the state budget for the current fiscal year. And for tourism, basically, we remain level with previous year's budget. So that's good. In total, tourism spending for the upcoming year includes $15 million to support Round 13 of Market New York, the funding program you're aware of and I'll be talking more about later on. $3.45 million for the tourism matching funds programs that go to our tourism promotion agencies across the state. $45 million towards economic development initiatives, a portion of which covers the vast amount of our marketing and promotional campaigns for the year. An additional $2.5 million for I Love New York programming. And a new funding line of $1 million to support a statewide museum study. So under that, ESD, in conjunction with a number of other state agencies, is going to be conducting a comprehensive study of the public and private museums all across the state. And we'll be reporting findings and recommendations. To date, there's actually never been a study like this. In fact, as far as we can tell, there is not one list anywhere in New York State of all the public and private museums because they work in different ways, right? That if you're an accredited museum, then SED, State Education Department, they have a list of you. But if you're a private museum, which can be somebody with a baseball card collection, but's open and calls themselves,
or the Rubin, or things like that, right?
They're not on that list, so there is no list.
Ross, can I ask you, what's being studied aside from that they exist?
So that's number one, actually. The number one thing is the number one thing is a census, to find out how many museums are there, how big are they, what are their budgets, that kind of thing. So that's a good place to start. And then from that will be also a list of what the state can be doing to better support museums across the state. So it'll be a series of recommendations of how government can better support museums.
So if I could just, the parish is a regional museum where I serve as one of the chairs of the board. If you're outside Metmo Magoogie Whitney land, right, the regionals, I would target questions depending on size, if you see what I mean, because I would say the medium size and the regionals have one level of need, and the Metmo Magoogie Whitney world may or may not have other needs, or it's almost like ESD giving a grant to Extel or whatever it is, or it's not. They're going to come anyway, right? The visitors are coming, but I would think about size, and maybe some of us here who work directly with the culturals could be assistive in some way about input.
Yeah. We're very early at this point. We are in the process of putting together an RFP to hire a consultant to do that. Like I said, ESD will not be doing this alone. By statute, we're charged to do this with NISCA and parks and historic preservation. There's literally like 5 agencies that are going to be working collaboratively, but we are the lead agency. So we're putting together the RFP with the consultant. With that consultant, We will be developing, I'm sure, a survey mechanism and, the scope of work and et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I'm sure there's going to be a point that we're going to need help of how to reach out to people to get the information they're going to need.
What was the genesis for
Yes.
this, other than realizing there was no list?
It was, we have been working actually with Assemblywoman Dee Barrett, who a number of years ago identified this and said, museums don't really have a home in state government. As I said, they're sort of bifurcated in different places, and recognized that there was a need to take a look and see, what is the universe, what is needed. And so this is an initiative she's been pushing for a number of years. She actually consulted with us through that process, which was greatly appreciated in terms of, from a tourism perspective at least, our receptivity and our thoughts about this. It was successful, I think, in passing in prior years, but without any funding attached to it. And what we basically said is if there's no funding, we can't really do it. This year, there was a success in getting $1 million, which should be able to fund that study.
That's great.
Yeah.
One way that I think, let's say in Buffalo, in Rochester, in Long Island, and that this becomes very different than, let's say, in Manhattan and Brooklyn, is that these museums become the cultural community centers. They work with the county execs. They provide huge amounts of community education, welcome and bi and trilingual and so it's a very different, they're called a museum, but the community role, I can just tell you the parish is serving 10,000 kids in Suffolk County a year, and we're in the Riverhead jails every week when the women run jails, and kids with autism and Alzheimer caregivers, and we're not alone in this. So I think figuring out how to dimensionalize this, not just art qua art, but the kind of concentric circles overlap with care and education, I think outside Manhattan, it's an extensive role that we're going to uncover if we do this properly.
Yeah. Well, and that's, that is why it was, I think, significant that there are a lot of agencies working on this. In a lot of places, this is about school curriculum, which isn't tourism, right? So there's a lot of different facets that's going to be involved. And even though we're the lead agency, what's clear in the statute and what I also thought was important is that it be looked at, as you said, from the multifaceted roles that museums serve, because that is not only about people going for a nice afternoon. It's about much more. It's about preservation. It's about all kinds of things, right? So it's going to be pretty extensive, I think.
It's exciting.
And what's a little scary on our part is it technically is supposed to be done in a year.
The clock already started.
And the clock already started. Right. Thank you. But our hope is that there could be an extension on that.
That's very exciting.
Great. So that's the budget. And I would also mention, in terms of the tourism budget, that is all in addition to the EDA funding. You've heard me talk about at prior meetings, that the EDA funding is in addition to the state resources. So we're in a pretty good shape. So what are we doing with all that? That allows us to move into our... Some of it. That allows us to move into our program work. We're going to start off with Rich, who's going to be talking about our current marketing work.
Hello, everyone. I think the best news about today's meeting is the scheduling of it. We can actually present the work in a timely fashion. Typically, just through the calendar, we are at the final stages of our campaign when we have a TAC meeting before winter or before fall. So we say coming soon, and then 3 months later, whenever we get together and we show it, but it's sort of the moment has passed. Here, our current summer campaign just launched yesterday, or today's Thursday?
Today's Wednesday. It was yesterday.
Right, so Tuesday we launched right after Memorial Day. So hope maybe you've seen it on air yesterday, but you'll be seeing much more of this out there. Before we get to the actual work, you can go to the next slide. We did I don't want to say small, but it wasn't an in-depth audience research piece. We did a sort of update on our audience research this past winter, thinking now that we're 2+ years since the lockdown, things have been open for a few seasons now. What does this mean from the inside, from a consumer standpoint? Have things changed drastically? Do they think differently when it comes to planning or their attitudes on choosing vacation? So we wanted to just go in there and get some, relatively high-level insights to help inform the work that goes out this year. The research was in the form of, it was qualitative, it was one-on-ones, think of one-on-one focus groups. They were all done through Zoom. We hit our various audiences, various targets. So it was a very diverse group we spoke to. And I think the fact that we did qualitative allowed us to dig a little bit deeper and really pull out some good insights that we could actually take some action on. The next slide. Just some of the highlights of that research. What we saw was that travel planners, they were sort of self-imposed stress or self-created stress when planning trips. They felt this pressure they wanted the trip to be as good as possible. I mean, everyone wants their trip to be as good as possible, but they felt this fear of missing out. And they want to make sure that they're spending their money on something that provides the family or whoever they're traveling with the overall best experience possible. They also indicated that they didn't say it was specifically due to COVID, but it seemed to be a trend amongst a lot of the people we spoke to. There are preferences now for shorter road trips and city visits. And those two types of trips have surpassed quote unquote resort vacations or longer distance trips in terms of how many trips you plan to put together. What we're seeing is the trend that started during COVID, where it was staycations or going off for long drives, more scenic local things. So people are doing more smaller trips versus the one large. All right, my summer trip is I'm going to some island for a week. I'm going to spend more time in the city that I'm from or from the state, and exploring more of those sort of smaller trips, and also realizing that sometimes those smaller, less stressful planned trips turn out to be more enjoyable than the big ticket thing that they've been looking at for 2 to 3 years. Less stress involved, variety of things to do, things to keep the whole family happy. So, we wanted to make sure that any insights that we took from this were actionable and were able to sort of be incorporated into any executions that we did. So before I, let's say unveil, so oversell it. Before we kind of explain what we did, I said, let me show the work. Originally, I was going to go through, here are some of the elements that we incorporated, and here's the spot. So let's just play the spot first, then we can kind of go back and talk about some of the points that were incorporated.
Summertime in New York. It's easy. Easy to plan. Easy to please everyone. Easy to get excited. Easy to get away. It's easy to love New York. Plan your summer getaway at iloveny.com.
So it's easy to love New York. That's, we always talk about cement. Is that a tagline? Is it a new campaign? Just a way of expressing some of the insights that we heard about. Is that going to show up in every piece of execution that we do? Not necessarily. I want to watch that Brooklyn documentary. It's interesting too. So you can call it a tagline, you can call it a new creative platform. Obviously, I Love New York is the core creative platform to the entire campaign. That is not changing. We wanted to emphasize the I Love New York aspect of it, but from all those points that we heard about the stress in planning, the stress in getting to places, the need to keep everyone happy, we know that our storyline we always say is New York State provides the most breadth of variety. You want culture, you want museum, you want city, you want outdoor hiking, you want to shop, food, all those things. Not to speak for other states, a lot of other states, a lot of other cities, there's usually one core point you go to that location for. New York State, everything, across the spectrum.
Can I ask you about the stress? What's producing it, and is any of it coming from the rise of travel influencers?
Some of it, we got glimpses of the whole Instagram, people going to places just for the sake of taking the picture as opposed to experiencing what the thing's about. So some of it comes from that. It sounded like, again, this is qualitative, but from hearing the interviews, there was definitely a lot of mentions of social media. Sometimes social media overhypes a thing. You see something on social media, you go there, and they're like, what is this? This is like a half-day trip, or I got my picture, now what do I do? So a lot of times the vacation influencers are overhyping things, and other things that are on their radar are not being seen. So what we're trying to provide is, through iloveNewYork.com and all of our other assets, here is the true picture. Here is everything we have to offer. So the idea with all of our sort of broader marketing is to get you to come to the website, to dig a little bit deeper. We try to scratch the surface. There's only so much you can fit into a 30-second commercial, or when we talk about our experiential activities. It's all about getting New York State in your consideration set, and then hopefully that sparks something in your inner planner soul to go to the website and find out more about and plan the trip that makes the most sense for you.
So if we know travel influencers are a thing, which they are, how are we reaching out to them and interacting with them?
That's something we're working on right now too. We're
It's
trying
really
to take
important.
our step, what we do right now on social media, a little bit further with travel influencers. In the past, we've worked with them and it didn't really work out the way we had thought it would. So we're kind of digging into that right now. That's something we're working through with our web team, our social team, and the agency to figure out what is the best way to leverage them. The easy answer is find some, pay them, have them talk about us, but we want to go a little bit deeper, make sure they're actually acting as partners on our behalf as opposed to just a paid entity type of situation. Because there's a lot of them to choose from, and some of them are valuable and have good loyal followings. A lot of them are just clicks and numbers. So it's something we want to make sure that before we make any kind of partnership, that it makes the most sense for us. So it's definitely something that's on our radar, something we're actually working through right now. But the idea of this line, it's easy to love New York. Doesn't stray far from what we've said in the past, but it sort of calls those pain points out and addresses them head on. It's easy to plan, it's easy to get to, it's easy to find something to love about, it's easy to keep everybody happy. So we thought that's a strong line. Again, used where relevant. It's not going to be the be-all, end-all. It's not going to be replacing I Love New York. ilovenewyork.com. I Love New York is still the core campaign element, but this is just another way of articulating that. So that TV spot, that's one element that just started running yesterday, should run through mid-late July in our typical in-state and drive markets. So beyond the higher level TV and digital advertising, we actually launched this weekend our mobile tour. And I should say these pictures and these words and bullet points do not do it justice. So at the end of this slide, we have the calendar of tour stops. So please, try to catch up with it at some point this summer. But the idea with this year's mobile tour was similar as it's been in the past, is to get people engaged and think about New York as a travel destination. We don't want it to be too educational, too information heavy, because then it becomes just a portable traveling vacation kiosk. That's not that much fun or engaging. And we also didn't want to go too high level and have it to be just about fun, because then we're not really getting our message through. So we tried to strike this balance of fun, interactivity, and a deeper educational piece of it. And you can sort of strike your balance. The way this is set up, maybe jump to the next slide, it's a better visual. The way this is set up is it's 6 pods. Maybe just jump to the next screen for a second and jump back. There's sort of, if you can picture it overhead, 6 cubes back to back, 6 pods back to back. Each one represents a different area of activity that the state has to offer. So we've got fun for the younger heart, that's more like amusement parks and things to do with families. Relax, unwind, that covers spas, wineries. There's a little bit of a Venn diagram situation, like each location doesn't necessarily fit into one of those boxes, but for the most part, these 6 categories cover almost everything we have to offer. Taste the local flavor is about food. Maybe jump back. Discover the outdoors is obviously outdoors, hiking, parks, things like that. One of the pods are on art, culture, and historic destinations, and the final one is on sports. And each one has its own interactive features. We won't go into detail on all of them right now, but they're meant to be photo opportunities. The historic and cultural one, you really can't see it, but basically what that is a whiteboard with sort of coloring book style illustrations of different museums and historical attractions. And there's buckets on the side of magic colored markers and crayons for the kids to sort of color that in. At the start of each event, that'll be wiped clean so kids can read about these places while they have some fun and color it. The sports one is more of a puzzle. Each one of those cubes has a different bit of information about various sports in the state. Everything from Buffalo Bills and baseball teams and Saratoga Racetrack, Baseball Hall of Fame. Jump to the next slide for a second, or the previous one. The balloon is meant to be just a photo op. You can stand up with the balloon. And the point I want to make is also in front of all of those pods. You really can't see it, but there's a little podium with an iPad or a screen on it. that's where you're going to get some deeper information. So we've had the fun moment, you've had the photo taken with the scenic background, or you've colored the wall, or you've played with the food kiosk. But if you want to find out more about these specific locations, you can go to that to the iPad and read more about those individual locations. So like I said, it's a balance between content about specific locations and the fun interactivity. Without the iPad element, this is fun, but what do I really learn? What am I educating about the state? Without the fun interactive piece, you've got a series of web pages that it's not that engaging at a public event. So we tried to mix those two things, and the first event was this weekend at Jones Beach Air Show. And we saw it set up, beautiful location right on the beach. We had a successful first 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. It was a beautiful event, packed Jones Beach, people flowing through this. We have trained brand ambassadors who are going to travel with the tour. We still have some of the elements that we've had in the past where we have an I Love New York gift photo station where you can take a picture with an I Love New York backdrop with different props. You can spin the wheel. From a measurement standpoint, we've installed people meters. We can track how many people are actually engaging with the event itself, how many people have opted in to receive future information from us. We could spin the wheel, win a prize. So we've taken elements that have worked for us in the past and sort of built upon that. And here is the latest. This is it for the most part. This is the schedule. There may be a few more events that we add in over the course of the summer. But for the most part, here are the stops, and we can send this to everyone. But like I said, you got to really sort of see it to appreciate it. Those slides, I think, were a good representation of it. But we've been working on this for months, so it was great to finally see what I've only seen in the form of 3D renderings on PowerPoints live and in person at Jones Beach this weekend. So it was great to see that. And this was a group effort. Everyone on the team had a hand in this, but I want to just give an extra shout out to the experiential team, to Adi Wilk, Tanya Perez, and Mariagi, who've been working on this, tirelessly, effortlessly, whatever the words you want to use are, for months on this. And this is only one element of it. This is sort of the core piece of the experiential tour. Jump to the next slide. This event happened already, but this was our presence at the PGA Championships in Rochester. And Sarah, thank you for trying to make a plan. You were probably spending a lot of time there. I spent my time there. I'll get to visit Rochester in a couple of weeks. But it was just a great event overall. The golf event itself, hopefully you've all seen clips of it on the news. Beyond just being a beautiful event hosted by Rochester, Rochester was put on a global stage. This was an internationally followed event, and it sort of made it past the sports pages, if you will, by that. I forgot his name already. Mike Block, the PGA pro who sort of played, sort of every man, and it went beyond the sports report. CNN had coverage of this human interest story, and all those reports mentioned Rochester. Rochester was beautiful on the global stage. CBS had a lot of cutaways when they went to commercial. They would show shots of downtown, so it was a win-win for the state and Rochester. Specifically that event, I Love New York partnered with Taste New York to put together what we call the New York State Tasting Yard. And this was an activation put right outside the most popular part of the event, the merch tent, which looked like a department store, by the way. But every single person who went to that event, went through that merch tent, happened to see our booth. And what this was meant to sort of spotlight was not just the regions across New York from travel purposes, but Taste New York featured probably, I don't know the exact number, probably close to 100 local Taste New York partners, food, beverage, wine, beer. They had a rotating schedule of 3 or 4 vendors at any given time in the tent giving out samples, and that shift would switch over 3 or 4 times a day. So like I said, over the course of the week, there were probably close to 100 vendors that were featuring their products, all free of charge. Any patron that was at the golf event could walk in, sample whatever brewery was on display at that point, or food vendor. There were a number of news pieces also covering that, featuring the local vendors. Governor stopped by to this event. It was great, good photo op. That made the press. So all in all, it was a great event, not just for Rochester and the golf fans, but from an I Love New York perspective overall. And we're already working on plans for Bethpage in a couple of years. Bethpage is going to be hosting the Ryder Cup in 2025. So a lot of us who were on site at the PGA Championships took a lot of notes. We're going to try to top our presence here, which was really tough to do, but in Bethpage in a few years from now.
Can I ask you a question? Are you able, you said there were about 100 products, local products. are you able to go, if you go back, there's an iPad, can you go and say, you know, love the olive oil, love the wine, or, oh, Shin, and type in, you know, Shin and your zip code and see where it's sold? Because it would feel to me, that's the wraparound on some
That,
levels,
right, the connection to finding out more about those vendors is sort of the drive to the Taste New York environment. So the Taste New York site has lists of all of their partners, all their vendors, all the vendors who were there at the time they were handing out their samples. They also had different, you know, swag and T-shirts and their business cards. So there were definitely, you know, calls to action to get back to that product. The kiosk, the I Love New York kiosk, was more geared towards I Love New York content from a tourism perspective. But there is cross links between I Love New York and the Taste New York program. So on the Taste New
I
York
think we
program,
want to make it easy.
Yeah.
I mean, if I like a wine there, I don't want to have to then go to it. If they're participating and they're contributing,
Yeah.
I would have in that kiosk, or there's one link that you can QR code and it hits your phone and tells you where you can buy every product. I think that would, on a consumer product level, be smart
yeah,
for next time.
yeah, no, totally. And these are just some examples of some of the, you know, the interactive elements that were there. Like I said, the I Love New York kiosk, the photo booth was there. Governor stepped in, took a couple pictures of it. So overall, it was a great presence for I Love New York and for Taste New York.
Rich, I noticed, is it this new this year? You seem to be leaning into that heart red
Yes.
as the consistent color that seems to be really popping and quite nice. The red and black.
I mean, that there is the I Love New York on black. There's the I Love New York black type on white. So there's very few different iterations that we use. I think for this particular execution, we wanted the red to pop a little bit more because the main tent we wanted to, you know, it was a co-brand between Taste New York and I Love New York. So that's more of the look and feel of a sort of a bistro or sort of restaurant
it's
thing.
got the natural
But to have the
vibe,
I Love New York
but that
pieces pop out.
red is
right,
really
the red and the
driving it
black.
home
We just kind
that
of
this is New York.
Yeah, to make us pop out a little bit more. Same thing, you know, like you notice that like on the kiosks, there are flags on top that are more the traditional white because we have the whole presence. But you can see those flags when I was coming from the parking lot through the underpass to get to the beach. We were still probably 300 or 400 yards away, and you can see the flag. So those are one of the things that we keep in mind. What version of the brand do we use for that particular event to make sure it stands out and pops as much while staying, you know, true to the brand parameters. And then final in terms of experiential, Ross could talk a little bit more about the overall program, but building off of our presence at LGBT and Pride events, this is this year's presence that we're going to have. Last year we had the core attraction was the Aura Reader, right?
Yes, that's
so
right.
So this year,
Live Aura
That's great.
Right.
I love that.
So building on that same premise of having some type of experiential, you know, fun, engaging piece to kind of draw you in, or we can talk to you about more of the specific attractions that are around the state. This year's element is what we're calling kaleidoscope photo moment. So maybe jump to the next screen.
You're going to be at Pride, New York, right?
Yeah.
The city.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, right. So this, you stand in this sort of mirrored, what do you want to call it? Kaleidoscope. You're standing in a kaleidoscope. There you go. Right. I'm not sure if there was a word for a life-size
So
kaleidoscope.
grabbable. It's great.
So you climb into this kaleidoscope. It's got branded images. It's got the logo on it. It's just a cool photo op.
Right.
Again, catering to social media. People want to take their pictures. So while they're there getting a good photo op, we'll also be talking to them about relevant locations across the state.
And then we give you the photo in that customized frame on the right. That's the front with your picture, and on the back, those are actually attractions in New York State with the website. So it's a take home.
But anyone who does that, we should get their data.
We do.
And send the,
Email.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Not just the actual heart that we want the,
Data capture.
we want their
right.
data.
And that's what I should say, you know, on the overall, on the tour itself, there's that balance between capturing data and giving someone a fun experience.
Sure.
We don't want to put a gate behind everything, say to interact with us, you must give us your email. So we want to capture as much data as possible, but we also wanted to provide as much engagement and fun and education to those who just don't have the need or want to provide an email. That's why we've sort of enhanced our measurement capabilities on all of our activations to not only be based on measuring how much data we capture, but how many people came through, what time they spent there, and we're actually doing surveys to get insights as to people who interacted with our presence at either the LGBT events or the general event, what their takeaways were. Did they increase their consideration of New York State as a travel destination? So we're trying to get as much from a measurement perspective out of these activations as possible.
Where will this be?
So there's
There you go.
there's the tour.
I served it right up for you.
So, yeah, we're doing 5 stops. I will point out the Syracuse Mets will not be that full interaction. It'll be scaled down to fit with the setting, but we will have the I Rainbow Heart NY Giant sculpture that people can take a picture, and we'll have iPads and information and giveaways and things. But that's the schedule.
And where specifically in New York City Pride?
We'll be at the festival, which is on 4th Avenue, I think, between 14th and. I'll get you the
Better than
information.
me.
It's the Pride Fest. It's the official Pride Fest.
Okay, great.
And you know the experiential part of I Love New York LGBTQ is only part of the program. We've actually been promoting Pride events across the state as sort of a hook to get people to travel since early spring, and we have updated our website. We basically have an online Pride guide that tells people the 24 prides happening across New York State this year. We have I Love New York blog posts and social media. We did some targeted paid digital and print advertising in some specific strategic LGBTQ outlets like Passport and The Advocate and Out and Gay City News. And so, you know, the way it works is the Pride events themselves are an opportunity for us to promote travel, but we also in advance use the Pride events as an excuse to get people to go travel. So it works kind of in both ways. So that's I Love New York LGBTQ, and that also concludes our consumer marketing.
Right. That's
Great.
I have a quick question, Rich. I noticed in your schedule of Pride marketing events, you had Philadelphia, and that makes sense. But I also was struck by the fact in that list of 10, the earlier in your report, 10 events, I guess is what how they're referring, that one of them was in Montreal, which I think is great and smart. But it makes me wonder if, for decades, for many years, I've heard that Canadians are the largest foreign tourist contingent in New York State.
Yes.
Is that still the case? I assume so, but so it does make sense to market to them.
Yeah, right. But remember, with all travel, particularly international, there's the number of people and the number of spend. The spend is bigger, I think, certainly proportionally, but I'm pretty sure overall is bigger from some other places. But certainly the number of travelers is more from Canada.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people from further away stay longer, spend more.
Of course.
Right. Day trips, weekend trips. So Canada definitely is a huge, all the drive markets. That's why we a lot of the scheduling is based on logistics too. You know, what's available, where are we available. But we try to, in the past, I don't think it's on this list, but in the past we've done events that were in Vermont, Massachusetts, and strategic spots that make the most sense to do. But Montreal, that Formula One is one of our prime events we usually are at for the past few years.
Right. Japan used to be the lead spend source. Probably not true anymore.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
Then it was replaced by China, and they're not going anywhere.
Right.
So who?
Well, I'll be talking about international in a bit. But
Oh, okay.
Our international offices are UK, Germany, Australia, and Canada. That is based both on their impact, but also it is based on where does all of New York State, not just New York City, but where does all of New York State have the most of what people want to do from those markets. In other words, Germans will take a plane to fish. Germans will take a plane to get in a camper and go, right? So Germany's a very important market for upstate New York.
I thought go to museums too.
They do.
And beaches. They go to beaches heavily.
But that's kind of the point, right? Like Australia, there are other markets that probably bring in, that do have more economic impact before Australia. But the reason we pick Australia is because, certainly beyond New York City, what Australians like to do when they travel, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Mark Lee.
Well, there are a 10-hour drive for an Australian is nothing. That's the
Makes
big
sense.
thing. So they love to explore, and the difference in the size of Australia compared to our state is so significant that and of course the appeal of the city itself, and then not knowing anything about the state.
Right.
Those combined elements make it really appealing to them.
And the length of stay, right?
Yeah.
they're not coming for a weekend. They're here.
And they're also great spenders. They
Yeah.
spend.
Which is a great transition into our travel trade work because the vast majority of, did you have more, Brandy? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
The vast majority of our travel trade work up until now, pretty exclusively, has been international. You've heard me talk about it at prior meetings, thanks to the Economic Development Administration grant that we received. We also now are being able to work with the domestic travel trade, which we really haven't been able to do. And so we've actually been a lot of work getting that program up to speed. We are happy to say that we've recently finalized a contract with Break the Ice, who will be working with us specifically on the MICE market, amateur sports, group travel, domestically.
What is MICE?
I'm sorry, meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. Did I get it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So it's basically business events. Business travel is largely, well, not just business, also includes consumers. It would include
Unions, and there's all types of things, bank travel, like bank supported travel, family reunions, military reunions, all kinds of.
faith travel, actually, performing arts travel, like the high school kids that are going to, you know. So yeah, it's a very important market, and frankly, we haven't been very present there domestically. So we're excited to finally be in that space. So we'll be hosting, we'll be going to key trade shows where those folks are, the opinion makers, the tour operators, the event producers. We'll be going to the key trade shows where they are. We'll be hosting fam trips where we'll be bringing them to New York State to see how great New York is to hold their events, et cetera, et cetera. So we're excited to be underway with that. And then, of course, the majority of our trade, like I said, continues internationally. On May 16th, we actually held a day-long international workshop in Albany at the Empire State Plaza, where we hosted 25 of our DMOs and TPAs from across the state to bring them in contact with our new reps in those countries I mentioned, Canada, Germany, UK, and Australia. Because we just went through the RFP process, we had one returning rep from Canada. The other three are new. So we thought it was a good opportunity for our partners on the ground to meet with them. They got to hear a market update of what's going on. They got to get information on the co-op marketing opportunities that will be happening, including from Brand USA. You know Brand USA, the I Love New York of the United States of America. We have a paid partnership with them. They were there as well. I gave a more general I Love New York update. Markley wrapped up the day with some action steps that the TPAs can take to be more effective in the international space. And then immediately following, we had those international reps tour New York State. They did a fam trip of their own, which Heather helped lead. It was quite extensive. They did, so let me see, they went to Capital Saratoga, Adirondacks, Thousand Islands, Central New York, Greater Niagara, and Chautauqua, Allegheny over 6 days. So a pretty intense tour of New York State to at least give our international reps something more than just looking at a website and getting to see some of the state so they're better able to sell it when they go back home.
We had a driver with a big Suburban.
And then the last thing they got to do, because we get our money's worth out of those tickets when we bring those reps over, they did the workshop, they did the fam trip, and then they went to IPW, which David was at with us. We were down in San Antonio this year from May 20th to 24th. Markley and I attended for I Love New York. A rep from Finn Partners, our PR agency, was there. Like I said, our international offices were there. And 2 of our reps, like I said, from our travel trade group, helping us to coordinate our booths. You can see there our new display, our new booth. In our I Love New York booths, in other words, the ones that we paid for and operated ourselves, we had 7 statewide partners in there. Sullivan County, Oneida County, Finger Lakes Visitors Connection, Beyond the Big Apple, the Wild Center, Thousand Islands International Tourism Council, and Uncle Sam's Boat Tours from the Thousand Islands. That's in addition to the number of partners from New York State that were in our booth but had their own booths in our same aisle. So that included Dutchess County and Long Island and Niagara Falls and Buffalo and the Corning Museum of Glass. And that doesn't even include all of New York City, which had a huge display of its own. It had tons of partners, including David and lots of others there. But in our little 5 booth area ourselves, Markley oversaw approximately 200 meetings between Monday and Wednesday with the tour operators. That new design you see with the neon I Love New York over the arch, with the carpet, with it, was very well received, both by the sellers and the buyers, the members of our delegation. So we're excited about that.
I'd like to interrupt and put on the record also, I heard on unsolicited, most people don't know I'm part of TAC or New York State, that they complimented this year's booth design and that there was enough complementary between New York City and New York State that it felt like a larger footprint and it just worked together very nicely
And
this year.
that was obviously the plan. Like we approach this similar to on the business development side of the trade show. We try to get as large a footprint as possible. Some of those we provide to our smaller partners that couldn't be there on their own. Some of the larger partners that can be there are in our sort of proximity, so it feels like we're part of the same footprint. Then you've got the bigger players in New York City that are there as well, so it all sort of plays together. If you're just walking through the event, you see New York.
It was excellent this year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank
And
you.
you're using the red.
Yes, we use the red predominantly again. Monday of IPW, a lot of people know, is Media Marketplace Day. So in addition to those 200 meetings that happened with tour operators, myself and Lauren Wire from Finn Partners, we met with 40 journalists, 20 each, roughly 20 meetings each, where we were talking to international journalists. And then Monday night, we held an I Love New York reception for tour operators, and we had about 185 people over the 2-hour reception that was held on the River Walk, and was very well received as well. So IPW was a big hit. Big success.
It was very fortuitous. Just so you know, the position where you were located was right at the entrance of where lunch was every day. So all 5,000 people literally walked in front of that neon sign.
First tents, lunch, we know where the action's at.
Well done.
Right, thank you. So it's a busy time of year this past spring for industry events. And we tried to do our part in raising the flag and being part of those events. We attended New York City, what was formerly New York City and Company. We attended their annual meeting on March 28th, and at that, Fred Dixon announced that New York City and Company is now New York City Tourism and Conventions, that we're all getting used to saying, and a completely rebranded look for the DMO. They did a lot of research, and they wanted a brand that reflected their purpose and mission. And they also, as part of that, also announced that New York City's economic recovery in tourism continues at a strong pace. A 72.5% increase in visitors between 2021 and 2022. 9.4 million international travelers visiting New York City, more than triple the number of 2021. And the increased visitation for 2022 is only 15% the record highs pre-pandemic. So the city's only off 15%. So actually not bad, and ahead of their targets, because they actually expected to be back in 2025, and it looks like they're doing better than that. So that's good news.
So one thing I thought might be an interesting nugget. Tishman had redone Top of the Rock because they're going through construction for 18 months. And my company got called in by a company called Map Projects to help design all the art and the wall tags and all the research for what that is. And they are in full-on data capture. They're getting a lot of New Yorkers because they went up with interesting, diverse, contemporary art. Cool New York company, something called Breakfast Studio, where as you walk past it, it mirrors the shape of your body in glistening colors. And so, as is common now in art, is that the viewer participates in the making of the art. It's not this, faded red velvet, a la Broadway anymore. You can see the making of it, you participate, the viewer becomes the art. They're now mapping the visitors that come every day. And then it resets every day. It's a big map that resets the beginning of the next day. That's common now in contemporary art and in museum and cultural experiences. They're seeing a big uptick in New Yorkers coming now.
Good.
So I just want to throw that out. I think it's not unimportant as we talk to our institutions around the state about how to drive traffic. Foreigners, of course, are important, but you can get born and bred New Yorkers if, frankly, it's good enough and not schlocky.
Right. Yeah. And even before COVID, roughly 60% of New York's tourism was intrastate, was people within the state traveling. So that
How do you see
remains
that
important.
at Podgorski?
Oh, that's a longer discussion
I
for
get
us.
it. Oh,
We're still
understood.
new, still data capturing.
Got it.
Not to share that yet.
We were also in April at the Museum Association of New York's annual conference in Syracuse. We have a partnership with them, and I attended and presented our I Love New York update and talked about how museums can work with the Division of Tourism. We also were able to include promotional information on Path Through History to encourage participation by museums. Also, I wrote an article which is going to be in their newsletter coming up this month. We attended the NISTIA conference, New York State Tourism Industry Association, in Oswego, which was in April, and again did an update. We were also able to participate in a number of workshops that covered everything from outdoor recreation to workforce development and planning for America 250. And so we had a number of members of the I Love New York team participating there as well. I also got to attend the opening of the glorious new Gilder Center at the American Museum of Natural History. You could see it here on the screen. It is getting critical raves. The London Times said it's the only reason to visit New York City this year. Is it true? But that is what they said. The New York Times called it a wonder. It's really spectacular. Besides it just being beautiful, it has a new insectarium with this amazing leafcutter exhibit, live leafcutter ants working, a butterfly vivarium, an interactive Invisible Worlds immersive video experience like that Van Gogh thing, but it's a permanent exhibit of theirs. It's taken what's already an amazingly wonderful and amazingly important tourism asset and really ratcheted it up. That was something we were able to talk about at IPW a lot as well. So, some other program updates. I Love New York partnered with the Division of Labor again for a third year in a row to host a tourism-specific virtual job fair ahead of the summer season. We know how important workforce development is, and so we work with DOL to market the job fair. It was held on April 26th. We had 55 businesses participate with free virtual booths for job seekers that had between them 1,500 job openings available and 870 job seekers who attended. We know that jobs were created. We actually had reports back that some people found jobs at this job fair in the tourism business. And so we've gotten good feedback, and we're excited to continue doing this, but it's been a great partnership that we hope to continue.
Is there a resume bank where the resumes go online that could be shared?
I don't think it works that way, no. I believe the way it works is the relationship between the job seeker and the employers in their booths, so they can drop off virtual resumes with the employers that they're interested in. I believe is the way it works.
It's also great exposure for the businesses because, not every job seeker will enter a booth, but there is also like these live webinars that are happening throughout the job fair. A number of businesses decided to record a video to do basically a live presentation of their business. So, people are getting that exposure and know that these places are available and looking for job seekers. So it's a good marketing tool for them as well.
You'll remember at the last meeting I talked about the launch of the Black Travel Program that Governor Hochul announced in February. And since then, we have been driving traffic to our Black history and cultural content on the I Love New York website through ilovenewyork.com/backtravel. And we also promoted the initiative to international journalists and tour operators at IPW. It was a big part of my discussions at Media Marketplace. People were very interested in it. In June, we're going to be featuring the program at our Summer Media Night, which is going to be held at the Jackie Robinson Museum. And we're going to be bringing the Underground Railroad Heritage Center from Buffalo to come to the event, along with Allie B's Cozy Kitchen from Albany, who will be serving soul food for June is Soul Food Month, so they'll be serving that as part of that. And we'll be distributing our first Black travel itinerary to journalists there as well.
Anyone tapping Thelma Golden at the Studio Museum?
Not specific not for Media Night, but for the initiative, sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no, we've been doing stakeholder outreach. So far, we've met with the Underground Railroad Consortium, the New York State Commission on African American History, the Underground Railroad Education Center, Hugh Arts NYC, the Harlem Tourism Board. Tomorrow, Danae Jones-Persip on our team and myself will be doing an all-day visit in Harlem. We're meeting with about 20 to 25 different stakeholders in Harlem and then doing an Apollo tour, Sylvia's, et cetera, et cetera.
You haven't reached out to me.
I'm sorry,
I
Alan?
was going to say.
You haven't reached out to me as a stakeholder in Harlem.
Okay. Yeah, this was being done through the ESD's Harlem rep, so I will check in with them. But this is an ongoing process. Obviously, we're trying to meet with lots of people. We also have an RFP out now for a consultant to help be an advisor on the program. And so we are going through those proposals to hopefully have somebody that will have a consultant that can help with research and the implementation of the program, somebody who's done this in other states and that kind of thing.
Question, because I know we're trying to push Black travel for the summer. There are a few major shows up in New York by Black artists that are getting huge visibility. And I don't know who knows that. Because to ignore them or to realize that Mark Bradford is up at Hauser and Wirth, or there's one big solo show at the New Museum, Wangechi Mutu, a Kenyan female artist. It's a long-awaited, it's a blockbuster. I want to make sure that we're tapping the art world part of Black culture because there are behemoths that are showing, right, Hauser and Wirth's in your top galleries anywhere in the world, and they've got Mark Bradford up. So yes, soul food, yes, alleys, yes, but to ignore, right? So I just want to make sure that someone somewhere is tapping major Black artists at some of the biggest institutions right now in New York.
Yeah, I mean, this program works, well, like I said, we're getting it still standing up. Right. So we're going to have a consultant that will help us do this. But in the meantime, this works the way all our programs work, which is we rely a lot on our local partners to tell us what's going on in their communities. Everybody can let us know what's going on in their institutions through ilovenewyork.com, which is, basically the way you get listed in our database. So it'll be an ongoing process for sure.
It's tricky, right? I mean, just to problematize this. Hauser and Wirth doesn't need this necessarily. In a funny way, we may need them. I mean, the smaller ones who are not known will definitely need this, and they'll run to things. The New Museum is getting huge showings for Wangechi Mutu, right? But we will get more travelers if we profile this female Black Kenyan artist at the New Museum more than a soulful place they haven't heard. And so it's complicated because we have grassroots politics. I just want to problematize this. It's on some level sometimes the tension with this, right? But we need someone who knows what I'm going to call the kind of more behemoth cultural pieces, who sweeps them, because that is part of how I think you would get more Black travelers. Right? And so I don't know how that gets resolved, but just to surface it, because I do think sometimes in these discussions, we end up at the small place in Schenectady because we want to profile Schenectady and they need our help. And we're missing what's happening at the Brooklyn Museum, whose social media accounts, if they were to profile us, would have a bigger reach. So just to,
There's a major installation by a California Black artist, and I'm blanking on her name, on the roof of the Met Museum.
Lauren Halsey. She's extraordinary. So that's
Incredible.
a great example.
It's huge.
It's at the Met. So for us to, absolutely hands down and well said. Huge. I mean, they've had, the tickets are like standing room only at this point. No, it's extraordinary. So please.
Great.
And happy to be helpful, right? Because I'm tapped into some of this.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to breeze through the rest of this stuff. As you hear, it's really busy.
One more thing, Roundhouse is the latest extension to the Underground Railroad.
Yep.
Can you hear what I said?
Yes. So yeah, we've been very close with the Underground Railroad Consortium, which is supposed to be the collective of all the Underground Railroad sites in New York State. But we will make sure that that's
They are the latest edition, and it's an especially interesting site.
Great. Thank you, Barbara Lee. I alluded to earlier the funding programs that I Love New York administers. You'll see them up here. I'll just mention a couple of headlines. The Market New York the new round of $15 million Market New York funding has been announced. The consolidated funding application is available online, starting March 14th. Those applications are due by July 28th. We're going to be hosting a live webinar on June 14th for anyone who wants information on that. So if you know of anybody that can utilize either the $7 million matching funds that are available for marketing or working capital projects, or the $8 million for capital projects, please encourage them to go look at the guidelines and attend the webinar. Our matching funds for our TPA DMO partners, the 2023 program year is already well underway. We're in the period of getting the reporting on quarter one. And as I mentioned earlier, $3.45 million has been appropriated for the upcoming 2024 year. Guidelines and applications for that will be coming out this fall. You'll remember prior meetings, I talked about the Meet in New York program, which helps underwrite discounts that meeting venues, event venues, extend for meetings, conventions, conferences, et cetera. That program is kind of wrapping up. Deadline for applications is June 30th, though the events can happen anytime through the end of December 2025. If you know of anyone that can take advantage of that, they should do so soon. And then lastly, you'll remember under the Economic Development Administration Awards, that grant that we received, the $45 million we received, we're re-granting around $14 million of that to our local partners across the state. And $14.2 million was announced for that, even though we had applications for $28.5 million. For any sort of credible project that scored okay through the process, we generally reduce their award a little so that fewer people would be left out completely. So we're excited to see those projects come to pass. A couple of quick look-ahead things before I hand it over to our guest speakers. Path Through History Weekend's coming up June 17th through 19th over Father's Day and Juneteenth weekend. We have 78 events registered across New York State. Those are on our Path Through History website. And we also provided printed materials for them, rack cards that have been at those sites. They've been at regional parks offices, Amtrak, a lot of different things. The weekend's been featured on digital screens in our thruway operated rest areas. It's been on the I Love New York blog, on MTA away platforms, et cetera, et cetera. I was going to highlight some of the cool programs, but we'll let you go to the website and see some of those 70 events happening across New York State. We are getting ready, believe it or not, for the solar eclipse happening on April 8th all across New York State. We held a webinar for tourism partners in the Path to Totality, conducted an outreach campaign with them to find out what's going on in their areas so we can publicize that next. And we continue to encourage destinations to let us know what's going on. You can go to our website to see more about that. The 200th anniversary of the completion of the Erie Canal is actually not far away in 2025. Buffalo will be the host of the World Canals Conference, so we're getting ready for that. And then America 250 sounds like it's far away in 2026, but it is not. And so we are already in discussions with colleagues like the state historian and the Office for Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation to figure out how we can work together. We're part of some regional collaborations with neighboring states, so you'll be hearing much, much more about that as we go on.
Excuse me, Ross?
Yes, sir.
Could you add the Lafayette Bicentennial for 2024 and 2025?
Yep, we know that's one of the many anniversaries happening around the state as well.
All over the state.
That's right.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Peter. And Christine, that concludes our lengthy report.
It's terrific. And thanks also, Alexandra and others for your expertise sharing it. It's really helpful. I know when Ross and I went to Storm King, we were able to see Muti's work. It was on exhibit there for 2 years. And it really was a huge exhibit especially during the pandemic, where Storm King saw record numbers of visitors. So now I want to introduce our special guests, Steve Dubnyk and Sarah Poe, who come to us from Rochester at the Strong Museum, National Museum of Play, one of my favorite places. In fact, we talked about the PGA. When I went there 10 years ago, that was when I got my first experience at the Strong. Really terrific. So Steve is the CEO. And do I have that right? President and CEO Steve Dubnyk, and the Vice President of Marketing and Communications, Sarah Poe. We appreciate you coming to the city for this meeting, and we look forward to hearing what is going on with the renovation efforts that has been happening at the museum ahead of the June, I guess, is it the reopening or maybe a reopening? So I'm going to leave it to Steve and Sarah to fill us in on what's happening at the Strong.
Thank you. Do you want to start with the video?
Yeah, if we could start with we've just got a quick minute teaser video, and then we'll we'll get into our presentation.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for having us here today. And we'll just start with just a quick introduction of what the Strong is today and where it came from. Just briefly, the Strong started and was incorporated in 1968 as a Museum of Fascinations by Mark Woodbury Strong. It's been around since that time, opened its physical presence in 1982, has gone through 2 physical expansions, and is now 285,000 square feet in size. Pre-pandemic in 2019, we had over 600,000 visitors come through, of which two-thirds were the Finger Lakes region, 1/3 were outside of the Finger Lakes region, including 12% from outside New York State. So it's already a fairly large destination, if you will, and if we can go to the next slide. So this is the presence that we had within the museum, and you see the museum to the right, our parking area, the big blank spot in the middle, and then Rochester had one of these inner loop highways that circled the city and kind of choked it off from the rest of it, and was fortunate enough to get, with Senator Schumer's strong support, a large grant to fill in a portion of that inner loop. And so as that happened, it is adjacent to the museum, and we led an effort to say what should happen around with that space that's being built. And we went out and did a whole lot of community charrettes and looked at the opportunity, and also, if we can go to the next slide, did a marketing study to say, okay, if we expanded our marketing area from this kind of 2-hour drive time from Rochester, which is that blue ellipse in the middle, what if we expanded that to a 4 to 5 hour drive time, which now picks up heavily Toronto, Eastern New York, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and a lot of surrounding areas? What could we do with our attendance? And that really came back to say that if we expanded it, targeted similar demographics as we were already getting at that time, a lot of families, a lot of young professionals who were interested in gaming and play of different types, that we could grow our attendance by more than 500,000 more people, with about more than half of that coming from outside New York State. And so we put together a business plan and partnered with 2 other developers in town, if we go to the next slide, to create this concept of not just an expanded museum, but an entire neighborhood of play. And so we were going to look at taking the 285,000 square foot museum, adding a 90,000 square foot expansion, as we were giving up a portion of our parking space to help support the development from our partners. We were going to create a 1,000-car park in the garage to accommodate the increased visitation. And then our partners were going to build a combination of housing units, so 240 apartments, 17,000 square feet of retail in there, plus a 125-room hotel, all adjacent as part of the neighborhood and part of what we have there. And so that's been a project that we really started in 2014. The museum broke ground on this garage in 2018, broke ground on the actual physical museum expansion in 2021. And we're now coming to the end of that entire cycle within this. So next slide. So what was really coming out there, and you can see the different stages. On the bottom left corner is a vision of the housing. That's the first building that went up. A total of 5 different buildings were placed there. On the upper right corner is one of our retail units, establishments. Is actually a video game themed restaurant. It's from a company that headquartered in Frisco, Texas, was looking for a national expansion, had been looking at Atlanta, Denver, Montreal, different places like that. And they opened their second location in Rochester, New York, in the neighborhood of play. And then in the upper left corner is a 125-room Hampton Inn and Suites, which is going to be opening in the first part of June, just in time for our grand opening of the expansion on June 30th. So next slide. And so, as we mentioned, here it is, June 30th. This is what the outside will effectively look like with a new community space as part of it, as well as the expansion. And I'm going to let Sarah talk about what's going inside there?
Yeah, we're actively counting down the days. As Steve mentioned, we have a
29.
29. we have a countdown clock. It's real. So if you go to the next slide, this is what it looks like today. We are so very, very close, yet so very, very far. We look at it every day. So this building, which I'll explain as we get into a little bit, is actually we refer to it as our gateway building. We also sometimes affectionately refer to it as Lisa Simpson's hair.
Portal of play.
Yeah, and the portal of play. But essentially what it does is it connects our parking garage to the museum so that our visitors when they come won't actually have to traverse strollers and be carrying their things through snowy parking lot. We get a little bit of snow in Rochester every once in a while. It's rather inclement. So they're going to be in this temperature controlled environment where they're going to be able to leave their car and enter directly into the museum. So you can go ahead to the next screen. And from there, from our portal of play, you will actually enter the brand new welcome area in the museum. A brand new admissions. We have a brand new retail shop space, gathering areas for groups, for educational groups, for group tours. Lots and lots of open air welcome space. The second floor of this, actually, when you look up, is an absolutely beautiful butterfly canopy. That is
140. So it's 140 different 3D printed butterflies with OLED lighting in the wings, and then it's programmed so that the lights go bright and dim and kind of look like the butterflies are twinkling and flying across the opening crevice in there, which ties into our butterfly garden at the end of the museum that already exists today.
So if you go to the next slide, you'll see this is actually where we are. These were taken last week, so this is how close we are. We are truly inching closer. But if you go to the next slide, the fundamental pieces of the expansion really are two large exhibits inside and one large outdoor exhibit. One of these exhibits we are calling High Score. High Score will be the new home to the World Video Game Hall of Fame. The World Video Game Hall of Fame has been around since 2015. However, it has had while a very large national and international presence from a marketing standpoint, has actually had a very small physical presence in the museum.
So this is how you pull teenagers.
Yes.
This is how we pull teenagers.
Teenagers
Over here.
and 20-somethings.
Yeah, that's exactly how this goes.
Okay.
Yep. We're in the rendering on the right is the World Video Game Hall of Fame rotunda. Those screens will actually exist. There are controllers on either side of them. You'll be able to play games in the middle of this rotunda. And there are also 6 pillars, we're calling them, of video games. So I'm going to get these. Let's see here. Technology, business, art, society, play, and story. That was the last one we could think of this morning. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see how this is all coming together. So this is one of the technology pillars where we'll have pieces from our collection and a lot of educational and interactive pieces to each one of those pillars. And that is then the far right-hand side in the corner is the start of the Video Game Hall of Fame rotunda. It is coming together. It is larger than life in person and is coming together beautifully. The next slide is a rendering of the back of this exhibit, which is actually going to be a 90-foot projection of a timeline of the history of video games. So we are actually chartered as a history museum. A lot of people think that we are a children's museum, but the historical element in everything that we do is, while interactive and fun, also needs to be paramount in our exhibit. So if you move forward to the next slide, you'll see that it is in process, and it is, again, larger than life in the back of this exhibit. The next exhibit on this floor is what we are calling Level Up. So Level Up is it's an immersive video game experience. So what will happen is you'll enter the exhibit, you will get an RFID bracelet, you will create your own avatar, and you will essentially, yeah, very cool, right? And you will essentially be able to immerse yourself in different verbs related to things that happen in video games: run, skip, jump, shoot,
Yes. So it's solve, create, share, move, et cetera. Actually, you'll see on the next slide,
Yeah,
the
head to the next
periodic
one.
table,
Yep.
which will actually have them.
It's probably, it may be one more.
Yeah.
It may be one more after this.
No, we don't have it there.
We don't have it on this
But
one.
we actually created it as a periodic table format within that. So as you play.
I saw that earlier on. That's what-
So as you play it, you actually complete the different challenges in there, 30-something different interactives. You'll fill in different blocks on the periodic table with the intention of completing your own entire periodic table. And there'll be various stations going out through the exhibit where you can check to see where you stand and how much you still have left to do.
And as a member, if you plan on coming back, you can keep your RFID bracelet and you can continue to build over, numerous, over numerous visits. You can also purchase your periodic table in the gift shop.
And not pictured here, there's a bridge between these two exhibits is the world's largest playable Donkey Kong game. It's 20 feet tall. We actually worked with Nintendo Japan. They had to go to the president of Nintendo Japan for IP license, and it's a national playable game with the original guts of it that received a tremendous amount of publicity when we announced we were doing that.
Yeah. So, that's really the crux. The Welcome Atrium and the two large exhibits are really the crux of our new expansion. Also, on the other side of the museum is another large 17,000 square foot Hasbro Play Garden, which is a board game themed outdoor play garden. So you'll see Scrabble tiles. Most recently, what just arrived in Rochester, we got a big kick out of this a couple weeks ago. A rendering, the physical Scotty dog from the Monopoly game came in on a gigantic flatbed truck, pulled into downtown Rochester and backed into the museum. It has received more attention. It's been an absolute blast. There is how big is the fire-breathing dragon?
18 foot tall.
Yeah, 18 foot tall. Fire marshal approved fire-breathing dragon.
It's a safe dragon.
Safe breathing.
Literal fire, though.
Yeah, and you'll notice that there's a candy cane lane, so there's a bit of a candy cane there. From the top, a lot of the walkways look like the Game of Life with the spinner, that kind of thing. If you hit the next one, you'll see a few more of the renderings. So the Scrabble tiles on the left, the fire-breathing dragon on the right. That's the rendering of the Scotty dog, which when you stand next to it truly is that large. And the Game of Life and Trivial Pursuit on the right. And if you go one more, you will see what it looks like now. It is in process. The Scotty dog is in the middle. It's currently covered in, looks like it's a sort of a boat almost covered in the middle of the play garden. But this will also be set to open for our June 30th opening. On the next slide. So just a little note. Steve talked a lot about our marketing efforts and how increasing our marketing footprint was really going to necessitate and provide for the new visitors to the museum. One crucial part of that is our Play Rochester project. So Strong is the focus of your visit to Rochester in this scenario. But we know that in the family travel industry, there's a lot of needs for family, right? You may come to Rochester to visit the museum, but you may have children or other family members who want to do other things, and we hope you spend more time in Rochester than just visiting the Strong. So we've partnered with a lot of our other local cultural organizations, our zoo, the Rochester Museum and Science Center, the George Eastman Museum, Genesee Country Village and Museum. This year, we're excited to add our local baseball team, the Rochester Red Wings, and Seabreeze Amusement Park. And essentially, it's a $400,000 media plan in 7 feeder markets to Rochester that features the Strong as the reason to come, but also showcases everything else there is to do in Rochester. And Market New York has been a really, really wonderful partner in that program. We are incredibly appreciative of that. As are the remainder of the cultural entities in Rochester. We firmly believe that a rising tide in this case lifts all boats for us as well. So we open on June 30th. We are 29 days away, looking forward. So, since 2018, the museum has put $7 million of our own money into marketing the museum. The 3 primary largest feeder markets for us are Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Toronto, none of which are inexpensive media markets for us, but all of which are really beginning to show results as it pertains to web visits and actual physical visits as well to the museum.
Who's the architect?
It's a local firm called CJS Architect. They have been the museum's architect through the last 2 expansions.
Wonderful.
They work on the Women's Hall of Fame in Seneca Falls and a variety of other cultural.
You should encourage them to submit this for competitions.
Oh, they will. Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly, they will.
Wonderful. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks. Oh, any questions?
Very exciting.
I got to see it
You did?
about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's already made great progress, so it's
Yeah.
very exciting.
Yeah.
How are you connecting to some of the kind of major play? I mean, it could be Legoland, or you've got these places, in the Children's Museum of the East End, or it could be some of the children's entities around the state, or big commercial drivers like Lego. How can you?
So we work very closely with the toy and video game industries in particular. So I mentioned, so for instance, Hasbro Game Park is actually being funded a large part by Alan Hassenfeld, whose family was, the owner of Hasbro, right? We have a lot of video game industry donors who submitted funds for us. We have a toy industry, Toy Association, who supports us. So we work very closely with those industries. And then we work with other museums, both children's museums in particular, both in the state and across the country through the Association for Children's Museums. We've recently had visitation from Brooklyn's Children from the Queens Museum, who's looking to create a child's family section within it. They've been to see and talk with us and collaborate with us. And so we are connected through different associations.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming down. With 29 days to go, you kicked out
Thank
of
you
your
so
city.
much.
Well, let me put it this way, if they're counting on me to do anything, we're in deep trouble.
I've been to enough openings, you probably
I
will
was
be
gonna
painting
say.
at some point.
And your check writing, so they're
That's true.
Thank you so much. Looks wonderful.
Thank you.
I know that we are running close to our close, so I do want to thank you, Steve and Sarah, and wish you all the best. And I want to open the floor to any comments, questions, or updates that TAC members may have before we conclude.
Christine, I'd like to just mention that the position of CEO of ORDA, the Olympic Regional Development Authority, is now been posted. The position is now open and is listed on the ORDA site. The current CEO has announced their retirement, and they're looking for someone to head this $64 million organization. So they're accepting resumes. So if you know people that would be interested in running all the Olympic venues and ski mountains in New York State, please suggest that they put their hat in the ring.
Absolutely. It's a big job and a very important one. So thanks for bringing it to TAC's attention, Eleanor. Anybody else?
May I speak up on Lafayette?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
My name is Peter Feynman, American Friends of Lafayette. At the invitation of James Monroe, he did a bicentennial. He did a tour in 1824 and 1825 of the then 24 United States within the United States. It was a time of great sectionalism and a presidential election year, which will probably be a lot like 2024. So he was probably the only one who could tour the whole country. There are many cities named after him: Lafayette, Fayetteville, LaGrange, after his home in France. So he was widely popular, no doubt about it. The Friends of Lafayette will be having their national conference in Lower Manhattan in 2024 and in Syracuse in 2025. These are the areas where he was at that time, 200 years ago. He arrived August 15th at Staten Island. He will come on a tall ship then over to Manhattan. We don't know exactly where he can land because it depends on resiliency and what they're constructing or not constructing in Lower Manhattan. Then will be a parade from roughly Castle Garden up to City Hall, which is what he did, and a variety of activities here in Lower Manhattan. On Sunday, the 18th, he will be extending it in Westchester, which at that point included parts of the Bronx. County Executive George Latimer, I'm reasonably sure at this point, will be proclaiming it Lafayette Day, and will be supporting it as he goes from the Bronx through St. Paul's Church right to the Connecticut border. And there will be a series of parades. There'll be buses coming up from the people who are attending the national conference. In 2025, in Syracuse, well, Lafayette travels at that point from Buffalo to Albany roughly during June. So the Erie Canal is not quite open yet, but he does travel on the canal. He does travel on parts of it. I have had communication with the Buffalo Maritime Museum about the Seneca, the packet boat that will come down here, the Seneca Chief, with the Wedding of the Waters. And of course, there's the Canal Conference up there in September. So we have to coordinate all these different activities. Since he's a very popular figure with revolution impact, even though he's coming long after the revolution, it's kind of ironic. We're celebrating his return here before we celebrate his arrival here, but that's how it works out. But it does mean there's potential national audience of people who are interested in Lafayette. So I want to put that on the agenda and make sure your slide is updated to include Lafayette for the next meeting.
Great.
Duly noted. Thank you so much, Peter. Any other new business? Ross?
Not for me.
Okay.
I would just, Christine, one small announcement. The museum section of the Times a week ago profiled what they thought were the best shows, museum shows around the country. And I believe that there were 2 in New York State, and one of them was at the Parrish Museum, which turns 125 years old this year and has a blockbuster show. The Times did a standalone article also on JR, the French North African artist, has done a huge installation across the front of the building on the children of the displaced, Rwanda, Ukraine, etc. It's just been installed. There was a standalone Times article on that also. So I'm going to spend a lot of time out there this summer, but would encourage folks to come visit. The show is extraordinary. It's basically what they've done very smart as opposed to a boring timeline show. They've had they've got 40 of the hottest diverse contemporary artists who have gone into the collection and picked works that move them and then are hanging their own work side by side in dialogue. Artists like Ugo Rondinone has taken over an entire room. I mean, it's an amazing, amazing show. And so certainly we're getting tons of tour buses. So whether profiled or not, through tourism channels of the state, we are getting, I would say, 4 to 5 tour buses a day. They fly in, they saw the New York Times, they hear of the show, and they come. So just an FYI, an open invitation to this esteemed body.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on the recognition. Okay, so we are scheduled for our next TAC meeting for Thursday, September 7th in New York at 11 a.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Alexandra, and I need a second, please. Eleanor, thank you. The meeting is now officially adjourned at 12:35 p.m. Thank you all. Have a wonderful summer and look forward to seeing you again in September.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
From Cleveland, we would have grown up totally done that.
Yeah, true, yeah.
From your advertising.
Record.